Well, hello, Sarah Best. What's going on? How are you doing?
Hey, John Brower. I'm doing real good. It's good, always good to be in studio with you. How are you today, sir?
I'm excellent. Thank you. And I agree with you. I love the episodes we get to do together. And today we have, somebody familiar with the podcast who has been on before, an amazing individual. He's got a book publishing today.
Yep.
So, Sarah, tell us who we're talking to today.
All right, John, we are talking to Neil Pretty. He is a founder of Aristotle Performance, and the book, Leading Beyond Fear, the formula for psychological safety, adaptability, and growth is, in fact, a field guide for leaders. It's meant to be put in simple terms. It's about building psychological safety. The things that he's going to share with us here, John, are essential given the time that we're in. You know, these very turbulent, uncertain, crazy, economic, geopolitical, all this stuff. It's really, I think it can be a beacon and a very simple path to follow for our leaders. I am super excited to dig in. Neil, by the way, such a seasoned advisor to leaders. He's a culture architect, among other things. Fascinating human, very intelligent. I can't wait to hear more.
All right, let's jump in. The Boss Hole Chronicles are brought to you by Real Good Ventures, a talent optimization firm helping organizations diagnose their most critical people and execution issues with world-class analytics. Make sure to check out all the resources in the show notes and be sure to follow us and share your feedback. Enjoy today's episode.
Neil Pretty, it is so good to have you back on the Boss Hole Chronicles. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a real pleasure to be here. Always happy to see your faces and chat with you two folks.
Well, and John reminded us it's been a little over a year since you last were featured as a guest on the podcast. John, what did we talk about back then?
Well, it was called, the title was The Power of Intellectual Friction. Great episode. We will put that in the show notes because, Neil, I think you, as you always do, you give not only us, but also our listeners some really creative and I would say edgy ways to think about things in the workplace. And I think we're going to be talking about some more of that stuff today.
Yeah, I imagine so. Yeah, I mean, I try to be interesting.
Well, as we ended last time, about a year ago, we said, hey, what's up next for you, Neil? And you said, I'm working on a book. And lo and behold, the book is here. So we are so excited to feature you today talking about your book that will be dropping, I believe, on March 10th. Your book is here, Leading Beyond Fear, the formula for psychological safety, adaptability, and growth.
Yeah.
And I think our subject matter today is going to be so welcome to our listeners for a variety of reasons, mostly because what you're going to talk about is helpful. The things in your book, this is a field guide. So Neil, let's turn it over to you. What was the impetus behind the book?
So there was several. One was I've always wanted to write a book. There's always been a book or two in me. I'm a man of many words. So, and I write a lot. So there was sort of that natural, innate desire to do it. And then within the community of sort of senior practitioners that we'd collaborated with around the globe, there was a movement to create a psychological safety field guide. That was the initial focus. And that was actually the working title of this book, was the Psych Safety Field Guide. And through writing the book and through the publication process, it was like, this title doesn't really cover it. This isn't really all that is in here. It remains a field guide, but it's really, how do you get beyond the stuck places that leaders and practitioners in the book are referred to them as culture architects, people like yourself and myself who are, turning to resources. What do we need to train people on? What do we need to give people? What kind of frameworks actually help? Psychological safety, as I've mentioned in several other domains, and in this one, is the problem after the problem. We understand it's essential, but it's an outcome of our assessment of our environment, and we make that assessment based on a bunch of factors. So what are the skills that go into creating those conditions? So I think that's where the focus was. And for me too, I think there's two other motivating factors. One was, when I was a leader, when I started in a leadership position more than 25 years ago, which I know I don't look that old, but I'm starting to get some, starting to
It's
get some
true.
evidence.
You do
Starting to get
not look that old. Yeah, I can
I can tell.
attest.
But when I started in a leadership position a long time ago, it was where do you turn?
Mhm.
What kind of
Yeah.
skills do I need? How the hell do I do this? Was just kind of a constant question. And I know that that's an ongoing question for lots of leaders. And then the same experience happened when I started working with organizations, trying to support them, trying to support people in HR, trying to support leaders, trying to support executives. Where do I point them? What do they need? And when I started that, I wish I had a book in my hand
Mhm.
that I could have turned to
Yeah.
that was a little more easily accessible. The Dance of Change is a pretty thick book. The Fifth Element, or the Fifth Discipline Field Guide, is a pretty thick book.
Yeah.
And they're amazing. They're spectacular. But from a day-to-day, keep it on your desk kind of perspective, that's what was missing for me.
You wrote the book you wish you had at that time.
That's right.
We've talked about psychological safety. It's now being featured across all the platforms in many articles by anyone who's writing about important things in the workplace.
Yeah.
Just for our listeners' benefit, why is psychological safety so important now, like in this time that we're in?
The simplest way that I like to frame this is it gives you access to real-time reality. It gives you access to the perspectives of the people who you're paying to give you perspectives.
Mm-hmm.
Complex problems require perspective.
Mhm.
If people can't speak up, share their ideas, share their concerns, they can't do those things.
Yeah.
You can't have insight into complex problems. And as a result, you can often end up trying to solve the wrong problem, let alone solving any problems at all.
Right.
So psychological safety is really essential for complex problem solving within the conditions of, wicked environments, like we're often in now, that are constantly changing. There's new technology, there's AI, there's tons of ideas. So psychological safety is essential to navigate that with other people.
One of the things, Neil, that I have since we got working with you and we became a implementer of the Fearless Organization Scan, the thing that is I don't want to say it's amusing, but it's interesting how people just have glommed onto the phrase or the term psychological safety, but they don't know what they're talking about. I mean, it sounds great. It sounds like you have this,
Yeah.
highly insightful idea about the dynamics of the workplace. And when somebody says, "Well, we're really working on our psychological safety," I'll say, "Well, what do you mean by that?" Because I know what it is, and I'll share with you our definition. But it's something it's been around. The discipline itself, it's not new. I think more and more people are realizing now that this is something that is at the essence of organizational and team performance. And without it, you should not be surprised when you have more chaos or disengagement or turnover in an organization. Your organization has been so transformational in terms of how we have introduced it as part of our work with our clients.
Yeah, I think what you're sort of reminding me of is one of my favorite definitions of the word trust
Mm.
is a reasonable ability to predict the future. And in the book, I talk about like the primary function of the human brain is to organize our behavior in anticipation of future events.
Hmm. Okay.
Hmm.
If you have that as your core understanding of other human beings, you understand the human being at a primal level that allows you to acknowledge the impact of behavior and the impact of systems, the impact of culture on those human beings.
Hmm.
If you show up to a meeting and say something negative or even sounds negative after, a person contributes, everybody's aware that that's happened. Everybody's aware that that's how they're going to be received, and they can trust that that's how you're going to show up in the future.
Mm.
So they will organize their behavior to avoid that problem, and then you have a cycle that is complete. They have now organized their behavior to function within that system, and now you have to do the work of unraveling that. So when I agree. So when people say we're working on our psychological safety,
Mhm.
it's like the amount of times that's actually happening is very, very low.
Very small. Oh yeah, for sure.
So that
So sorry.
explains to me, I've often heard leaders being frustrated about people not speaking up.
Yeah.
So this means we can tell them, "Hey, you don't have to blame the people. It's
Yeah.
always their fault." Like, they had a chance to speak up. We've told them that
Yeah.
we're open to their ideas and
Yeah.
we need to know what they think.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
Absolutely.
yeah, that's a scientific way to help leaders understand it's gonna happen. Like, if the behavior is there, the
Yeah.
team will organize around that lashing out or that emotional display, that negative
Yeah.
emotion, whatever it is, and there isn't gonna be communication to the degree that we need it. I think that's
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, the reality is that most people are employees,
Mhm.
Yes.
and even entrepreneurs. You're for a large cross section of entrepreneurs and solopreneurs, you're in a position where you have to make nice.
Yes.
You have to make it work with people who, you can't really tell them the whole truth. And that's what we're trying to unravel, because if you don't have the whole truth, if you don't have the whole perspective, something is missing
Right.
that is
Yeah.
essential for better work together.
Is that what you would refer to falling in the category of impression management?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Impression management is like the method.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
So you've created this field guide, and before we hit record, we asked Neil, "Hey, like let's focus in on three really critical things that our listeners should take away from this conversation." First thing you shared was something called an update mindset. I'm intrigued by this. So Neil, take us through that. Tell us about the update mindset and why it is so necessary.
Essentially, this is my modern take on skepticism.
Okay.
The
Mhm.
skeptic says, "I can't know anything 100%." And that fundamental framing puts you in a position of humility to ask better questions and to invite new information, because then you're not so set on one solution or one conclusion that you can't change your mind.
Ah,
I've been in meetings where people have actually gotten mad at me for changing my mind based off of new information. So that's how entrenched it is that, and I'm sitting there going,
Yeah.
I changed my mind because new information came in and old me was wrong.
Uh-huh.
wait, are you saying you learned something and you adapted in that moment?
Bingo,
Ah,
exactly.
shame on you.
This is the shame on me, right? It's like, how dare you? How dare you learn and adapt? So yeah, I think that needs to become a point of pride instead of a problem.
That's so good. I'm thinking about so many leaders I know, and even just people in my family, they need to know. They have this insatiable need to have understanding of what is because it brings them certainty and it brings them a
That's
sense
right.
of stability and control. Hello, we are in an environment where we will never know all there is to know. Maybe it's always been that way, Neil. I don't know what
Yeah.
you think on that, but this is key that in a world where it would be an impossibility to know all there is to know about a decision or a path or a vision or a strategy, the update mindset you're talking about is the way we move with the knowledge, we grow,
Yeah.
we expand. Powerful.
Yeah, so I don't talk about this next example particularly in the book. It definitely hit the cutting room floor quick, but it is essential to I think understanding this is there's a category of people called hyper predictors. They're the best at predicting future outcomes. And the number one thing that they have in common is a willingness to take small pieces of data and update their opinion.
Hmm.
They are decoupled from being right. And as a result, they predict the future more effectively. That's the irony of people who are stuck with their idea
Mhm.
when who aren't curious about other perspectives, who can't see this as, our world is unknown and uncertain. So they try to say, this is my path and I'm going to stick on this path come hell or high water. And I don't care if you have a different perspective or you have a, spidey senses that something's wrong. Your intuition that's a feeling. So I don't care about that in business.
Right.
All of that information goes away. And as a result, their future is actually less certain.
Yeah.
Because they're attached more often than not to the wrong outcome. They're making a bad bet because they're gambling instead of updating.
Is that an ego thing, Neil, or is it something else or a combination of ego and what's your take?
I think there's a few things. So I think critical thinking is taught in schools, but skepticism is not. So I think foundationally being right is rewarded. Changing your mind is not rewarded. Like I just mentioned, I got literally yelled at in a meeting, for changing my mind. So I think another element is in organizations, identifying the problem, coming up with a solution, and then solving it is rewarded. And that's a very short cycle, or can be a very short cycle. So that's rewarded. Changing your mind is not rewarded. So I think there's systems and structures and sort of habits that we have in addition to ego. Yeah. It's uncomfortable to change your mind. It's uncomfortable to say, I was wrong. That's uncomfortable.
I wouldn't know about that, but I believe you.
I personally have made it in a way. I've kind of tried to flip that for myself. How do I actively see where I might be wrong?
Yeah.
Right. So this is the antithesis of classic boss-hole behavior. I mean, when think about that. If you could actually, again, you could be perceived as not having the courage of your convictions because you're waffling or you're vacillating on this decision, whereas that should be celebrated, realizing that I'm getting new information that's actually improving my perspective. But you will get a manager who will, to his or her last breath, stay with a decision because they don't want to be looked at as weak or inconsistent or something like that, and it blows up. That is a big change. That is a big, again, change in mindset. Because just real quick, we have a client that is really working on, when you say update mindset, they're focusing on growth mindset. Yours, I like the way you framed it, because growth is good, but update means I'm literally, the programming is, I'm reprogramming. I'm thinking about this entirely different. I'm growing at the same time, but it's going to actually influence the way I land on a particular issue. So that is incredibly powerful.
Well, and I think it's also powerful if you think about your own experience with updates in software.
Yeah.
New software comes up and you get it, and every once in a while they throw it out and start again.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, I really got to learn this whole new thing. And it's like, and it sucks and you hate it. And, there's people still using the legacy Outlook and but like they're missing out on a bunch of functionality.
Yeah.
And everybody goes, you aren't using all this new functionality that has available to us? Like, you're behind. And that's where a lot of people live, is in that past version that we know doesn't have the functionality of the new version. And the result is they're stuck, and the people who have advanced are not.
Well, I have two questions. One is, what's the cost of that, being stuck and not having the update mindset? What are we losing out on? And the second question is, you said it's necessary, which I 100% believe. Is it learnable?
It's absolutely a learnable trait. You just have to see it as worthy to learn. And that is what, we sort of talked about a little bit before the podcast. I'm at that Zennial, elder millennial cusp where, pre-internet childhood, pre-social media high school, and then social media hit, as that kind of era.
Right.
Yep.
So massive social and technological shifts all at the same time. What we learned was press buttons and figure it out, because you aren't going to break anything. So there's a whole generation that's just like, I'm going to figure it out.
Yeah.
And that created the conditions for that capacity to feel easy. But really, that's what you need to do. So that what I said earlier about trust, that ability to reasonably predict future outcomes.
Mm-hmm.
If you try and learn something new here, learn something new there, learn something new here, learn something new there, what you learn is that you're actually really good at learning. And that's not some sort of passive thing that just comes in, beams into the brains of others. It's
Right.
exposure. It's putting that hat on and saying, I'm going to try out different things and see what happens. The cost that you mentioned, so like AI is coming in like crazy. It is a white collar problem. Because it is rapidly replacing, we're working with something right now where it really looks like we're going to replace, four or $500,000 of investment in an exceedingly short period of time, about 30 hours,
Right.
you know? So like that kind of power is very hard to ignore. And people are really thinking like if they ignore AI, it's gonna not replace them. And the reality is it's already happening.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
that's true.
your capacity to learn is essential and use that tool and be engaged in that tool in part because what you lose is the ability to identify where the gaps are and then fill your usefulness in with those into those gaps. Great places to work reached out and asked me for what I thought my top skill of 2026 would be. And, the lots of the sort of standard ones hit the list, empathy, things like that, some really great things that are essential, but mine was sense making
Mm.
because there's so much noise. You need
Yeah.
not just a skill, but a process to get to what's essential problems to solve, essential direction to go in, what noise to listen to and what noise to ignore. That's critical. And I think that having an update mindset, having a capacity to learn for yourself, being able to understand that people are affected by the system and the situations around them, that kind of metacognition and that kind of perspective is essential for leaders to be able to create teams that can perform in those environments anyways.
So that sounds to me like the leaders of today and tomorrow have to begin to cultivate a whole new set of skills.
Yeah.
And that was another area you said we got to dive into. So tell us a little bit more about the skills that are going to be necessary.
Yeah. So one of the things that I do in the book is effectively make the case for a large difference between leadership and management.
Mm.
To be a good leader, you do need to be able to manage, but you don't have to be a leader to be a successful manager. But leadership requires skills, like we talk about prioritization. Prioritization is ordering things in the right order and the right sequence, but discernment is a much older term, but it's a skill that's even more essential because it places value on things.
Mm-hmm.
It's a process of creating an understanding of high value to low value, and then you can prioritize after. So I think one of the things that differentiates leaders and managers is discernment.
Mm.
So discernment is an essential skill that I think is necessary. And I think some of the other skills that are essential for leaders to actually engage teams at a high level now are skills like facilitation. If you can't facilitate a basic meeting, you can't facilitate an effective decision-making process.
Mm-hmm.
So in the book, I
Yeah.
talk about decision-making process. This is what a good decision-making process should look like, feel like, sound like, how the conversation should flow, those kinds of things. And that's nested right in there with other essential skills that leaders need to be able to engage in that you don't necessarily need as a manager, but they're essential skills to learn if you want to manage better too.
Sure. Okay.
I have a question about discernment.
Mhm.
It's a term that I've heard in like religious community
Yep.
or at church. It's time to discern your future or discern your path or for the business folks, for our listeners, how would you how would you define discernment in this context?
Yeah, so it's interesting because it is a term that's often used in those contexts because it's framed more like divination,
Mhm.
Yes.
like
Yes.
right, and to a degree, that's actually useful framing because what you're doing is saying, my business partner and I, Jason,
Mhm.
Mhm.
we were just on a call where we were talking about several elements of what we could be doing, should be doing. And it was, this has the most essential value. We should focus here. That's not prioritization. That's understanding what is going to be predictably providing the most value of effort in the future.
Yeah.
That's
there's a distinction there. Yeah.
There's a significant distinction. And to give you an example, a friend of mine is part of an organization that's focused on men's health, and they have 20 different initiatives. They have no capacity, leadership capacity, to say these are the 1 to 3 things. So now everything's important. So now they're trying to solve everything. They can't do it. That's not a prioritization problem. That's a discernment problem.
Good.
I like
what
that.
Other skills? Yeah, me too. What other skills?
Well, one of the other ones you mentioned before we hit record was, and I love this, emotional regulation.
Yeah.
We've had some stories of managers, or leaders clearly lacking emotional regulation, but give us your perspective on that.
I think emotional regulation is something that is being taught less and less. I've certainly lost my cool on more than one occasion. I'm certainly not speaking about that from a perspective of perfection. It's actually from a perspective of imperfection and understanding the consequences of not being emotionally regulated. So leaders need to understand that things like having 40, 30-minute meetings a week, that's not, I was talking to a leader recently that he said, I have 30-minute meetings every 30 minutes, 8 hours a day, this entire week. This one meeting is 90 minutes and that's it. That is going to put you in a place where you can't be calm, can't be centered, can't respond in a way that's productive. And that's the essential part of it is, like we're talking about psychological safety. You can set the stage for that, frame up work, you can create all the right conditions, and then you make it or break it with how you respond.
Yep.
So
100%.
yeah, and when we're wired to see that immediately, so you can't get away with it, you can't fake it. So the being emotionally regulated allows you to actually respond with curiosity, which is a higher order level of thinking than just rote response. Yeah, okay, great, thanks. That's not good enough. And I think that's why it's so essential for leaders to focus on their emotional regulation. So, when I was an early leader, I had someone say, why don't you just count to 10? Well, I didn't really understand the value of counting to 10, and that wasn't long enough.
There you go. Right.
Right. I wasn't setting the conditions prior. I wasn't giving myself the opportunity prior. I wasn't dealing with, at that time, my ego and pride. You mentioned that earlier, so I can admit to that now that's part of it. Was I felt like I was under attack all the time because I didn't feel secure in my role, secure in myself, secure in my position. So like these kinds of things are necessary to attend to. Not like, I'm not saying everybody needs to go to therapy. There's not enough data to support that, but
they do though.
It's essential to but it's essential to consider your entire condition before putting yourself into a position where your emotional reaction could derail all of your better efforts.
Oh, for sure.
So well said.
Yeah. It really is. And Sarah, sorry, this just makes me think about now in our world, Neil, part of what we do at Real Good Ventures with talent optimization, leader development, psychological safety has such a strong connection to the work, an area of expertise for Sarah on emotional intelligence. And the tools of emotional intelligence can be learned.
Yeah.
And without them, though, leaders will find themselves just burning out. Sarah, I shouldn't be talking about this, but that's what made me think of it when Neil said this is a skill that people need to develop.
I'm grateful, Neil, that you highlight the emotional regulation as an essential competency for leadership. I mean, we've long understood that lack of awareness of emotion, emotional hijacking, over responding to things. I mean, that's just the surface level. You harm people when you do that, which is bad enough. But it's also physiologically what continues to happen in our bodies. And I cannot say enough about how we've acclimated to dysregulation as a human species. And we have never been in a time like this, at least I haven't in my lifetime, where, conflict continues to rise and, the uncertainty of the future, this total ground moving all the time sort of thing. It is what we're dealing with. I heard it called ambient change or turbulent ambient change. Like it's just everywhere all the time. So I love that you highlight basically what I heard you say is, look, if you're going to be in that role as a leader, this has to be the priority for you. It's the, you know, uh, amplified, put your own mask on first, regulate yourself first. Otherwise, you cannot do your job. And you are with people who are dysregulated as well. That fight or flight response, there's no access to creativity, innovation, connection when we are in lockdown mode and we're not aware of it.
Mhm.
So I'm so
Well,
glad
and
that's important.
I think where the shift has really been for me in this is noticing that the way this is framed to leaders often makes them think that becoming emotionally intelligent or developing the skill of emotional regulation or however it's framed often
Mhm.
ends up landing in the camp of I need to become a therapist. I need to do this and be this for my people. I need to have the and that's not at all what it's about. I was through a series of events, I ended up at the retirement party of the CEO of McKinsey. We're going
Wow.
back like 12 years ago now. And at the time, I didn't really have the same understanding of it as I do now. But one of the things that was continuously complimented as people got up and did their toasts and speeches, and they complimented him on his capacity to make the right 50-50 decision.
Hmm.
Hmm.
The further you go up in an organization, the more decisions are 50-50. We go this way or this way. I don't know.
Yeah.
The data looks like it's about even. Which way do I go? And you got to go. And you might be wrong. So you want to be in this update mindset so you can course correct if necessary. But what becomes the essential differentiating factor is access to your intuition.
Hmm.
It's
Yeah.
your emotional system. It's your EQ. How do you feel about this?
Yes.
Becomes a very relevant question because it helps complete reality. If you can say in a meeting, okay, this is the direction we're going, but how do you feel about it? All of a sudden, people will go, I don't know about this one component. You go, okay, great. Let's keep our eyes out for that because
Mm.
that might be something that trips us up later. So that feeling gave you access to early warning signals of
Mhm.
things going wrong. Now you've de-risked your decision. That's
Mm.
wonderful. You've set the stage for updating in the future. You've created the conditions for adaptation, all because you created the conditions for emotions to be part of the conversation instead of separate from the conversation.
Right.
So this isn't a therapy session. This is strategic.
Mhm.
This
Yeah.
is thoughtful. It's completing leadership.
Mm.
And not to mention, just from a very fundamental perspective, you engage people in followership if you're someone worth following. If
Mhm.
you're flying
Yeah.
off the handle every 6 seconds, nobody wants to follow you. You're too
Yeah.
unpredictable.
You said something, it might have been Neil before we engaged in our podcast. It was about the problem after the problem.
Mm,
And this is clicking in my head. It is often the case that people. I know one situation. A CEO said something to not her direct report, but somebody else in the organization. Something stinging, something a one-liner. She kind of flew off the handle after receiving some news. So
mm,
that one person, and others have had a similar experience. That one person, like, carries that with her every day.
yeah,
It colors everything she says or does in any meeting that she's in. Can you just put a bow around this? The problem after the problem,
yeah.
this person, by the way, this leader is kind of like, what is preventing us from getting trust here? Like, we've been talking about this, we've been working on this, we don't feel it
Right.
yet. In simple terms, what would you say to her about all this stuff?
Have you identified the problem? Yes.
Yep.
Do you agree that it's a problem? And do you feel like it's a problem worth solving? If you can answer those 3 questions, then you can move forward to solving the problem.
Well, the problem is that people don't say what they're supposed to say. They're not saying what they're thinking.
Right. So I think in that case, the easy answer is go say sorry. Go take ownership. Ownership is not something that somebody can give you. Responsibility is something somebody can give you.
Yeah.
Accountability is something that you agree to in the process. It's a
Yeah.
negotiated part. And ownership is something you have to take for yourself.
Yeah.
So ownership is, in this case, that's where it really lands. And if you've wrapped your whole life up around being right, that's a big mountain to climb.
Sorry.
Yes, it is.
I was thinking
Yes,
of
it
so
is.
many people when you said that, but go ahead, including myself. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, that's helpful. Yeah.
Great insights. And again, I mean, I get it, Neil. I get it's almost like you're creating this framework to say this is why I wrote the book, because every single day leaders need to have access to this. And I really think that was, as we start to wrap up, that was one of the other points you wanted to hit about the work process, about the
Mm.
field guide itself. So take us down that path for a few minutes, just to help us understand the essential nature of the field guide.
Yeah. So, I mean, as you might guess, I sort of started off in what you need to understand. Here's big picture.
Hmm.
This is, almost philosophically, but also I talk a little bit about neuroscience and those kinds of things, like some essential understanding of how the brain works is
Hmm.
part of it. But that's a pretty small part of the book. I just wanted to make sure that it was named and there. And then I worked through essential skills, tactics, day to day things that you're going to have to deal with. And then some of the bigger picture pieces like facilitation, like decision making processes, negotiation, these sort of things that don't come up necessarily minute to minute,
Hmm.
but they come up often and they're part of the process of work. And if you can get them right, if you can get those critical moments right, work becomes so much easier. The ambient chaos that you mentioned, Sarah, which I think is
Mhm.
perfect. Like that, like the ambient change, ambient uncertainty, like that becomes less of a big deal.
Mm.
And all of a sudden work becomes less stressful and easier, higher functioning. And I think that's really, I don't know if I'm exactly answering the question the way you wanted me to, but that's what the book walks through.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
for culture architects, there's a whole segment of the book that's actually for culture architects, like how have we scaled this in organizations?
Well, and I was actually referencing that. I'm looking at it right now because, and that is chapter 6, being a culture architect. But you do talk about the key moments in critical conversations. I mean, you're breaking it down to the things that happen every single day
Yeah.
that help to establish a stronger, healthier organization that where the stigma of failure does not suppress everything. I love that when we got trained in the Fearless Organization Scan. Um, just the question, how do you deal with failure on this team? And when you get that flippant response of, "Oh, well, we don't fail around here," it's like, okay, I think I have a pretty good understanding of how you're dealing with
Yeah.
this. But
Yeah.
that's what they need every single day, and that's what the field guide is for. Go ahead. I didn't mean to cut you off, but it is
No.
broken down exactly like that.
Yeah, and I think and it's broken down like that because that's how people ask for it
Hmm.
when they're coming and talking to us, that's how I think about it. And I think for me, one of my biggest challenges is I tend to get like I'm very theoretical and I can hear a theory and apply it broadly, but most people aren't like that. So the work of the book for me was to break it down into these component parts that were chewable.
Mm.
And essentially, as a leader and as an organization, as a business, the fastest way to higher performance is subtractive thinking. Do
Hmm.
less bad things, and that's the fastest way to get better.
Yeah.
And
Mm.
these critical moments, these essential skills, this is the foundation. If you can get one or two of these elements right
Hmm.
and have them not being wrong, it's like all of a sudden an engine that has, you know, 8 cylinders. You're running at 6 or 5 or 4
Right.
because there's a few that aren't firing properly. If you can just get them firing properly, all of a sudden you got a ton of power left. Ton of
It's
power.
that's like Santa's sleigh and Elf. Like, in order for it to
Yeah,
take off, it needed more engine power. And we
that's
just
right.
sang to help that. But
Uh,
yeah, I'm with
Yeah,
you. I'm with
totally. It's
you.
like you need to really get going. You need some of these essential things. And I think that's what I see a lot of, is leaders just getting these really foundational basic things wrong. I mean, we call it the good driver problem. There was a
Mm.
study done in the UK. 96% of drivers said that their driving was above average.
And
For those of you who are good at math out there,
yeah.
yeah.
the math doesn't math.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Right? So that's the problem, is when we self-assess, we tend to assess ourselves higher,
Oh my gosh, yes.
right?
Yeah.
Leaders overestimate psychological safety 70% of the time or more, and it gets worse the more senior you are. You know, if you've read any
Yeah.
research around the iceberg of truth,
Mhm.
executives get about 4% of truth at the top levels.
Yeah.
This is the problem that we're really trying to attend to. And this is one of the problems when it comes to skill development, is that we think we're good. Doesn't matter. Just try to do better, and you'll do better.
Neil, you
Oh, I love
remind
the
me
way you
of
break that down.
oh,
Yeah.
sorry. You remind me of I'm sure you're familiar with Tasha Eurich and her work from Harvard around self-awareness. And we had her on a couple of years ago. She did a study, 5,000 subjects, asked the question, how many of you feel you are highly self-aware? Because I know in your book, in chapter 2, you talk about the elements to lead and then leading yourself. So self-awareness for us is central to effective, leadership, be an effective manager, be a non-bossful. But
Yep.
95% said, oh yeah, highly self-aware. And then when they went back and said, the study, I mean, it's been well publicized. As it turns out, only 15%, 1/5,
That's 10 to
actually
15%. Yeah.
actually
Yeah.
had any real sense of self-awareness. So
Yeah.
the delusion is strong.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
true.
Well,
I
and
mean,
John, oh,
we
sorry,
live
go
in a
ahead.
society where mental health language is prevalent, but mental health skills are not.
Yeah.
Correct.
We live in a leadership and organizational world where leadership language is prevalent,
Yeah.
but leadership skills are not.
Yep.
Yeah.
And that
So
is at the center of the book. I don't care how good you think you are. I'm not that good either. Like
mhm.
it's fine.
Mhm.
We all have work to do and have places where we can get better. And I think that what I want for everyone is to be a little bit more comfortable with that,
Yes.
and ask not how good am I or how aware am I? It's where might I want things to be better or different or more effective? And
Yeah.
I don't care if I'm not that good at it. I can get better at it.
That's really boils it down in a powerful way, and I think I'm hoping it's something all of our listeners can embrace.
Mm.
You're human. Welcome to
Yep.
humanity, and you just happen to have a heap of responsibility on your shoulders, and you can't let your ego take over.
Yep.
There's you can develop an update mindset. You
Yep.
can create discernment skill. You can develop your capacity to discern, and you can figure out how to emotionally regulate. You got to do it, and if you do that, these things that are essential to have in the culture and in the environment for us to survive and thrive through this crazy time, it's going to be able to happen. This is
Yeah.
good.
Well,
This is a great work you did here.
Thank you.
just a reminder to everybody, go into the show notes. You will see a link to the book that you can order today because it published today, a link to Neil's original episode on the Boss Hole Chronicles, which was equally amazing, and also his LinkedIn profile. So go check it out. Neil, will you promise us to be back here when you write your next book?
Yeah. Yes, I will.
Yes.
Yes, I will. It's already in the works.
Is
I
it
was going to say, you
really?
said there were 2 books in you.
Oh
So
yeah.
come on.
Yeah.
Awesome, man. We got a
Yeah.
third one in the queue.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That is great. This has been great, Neil. Thank you so much. And again, I appreciate you once more contributing to the Boss Hole Transformation Nation. It's helpful.
Yeah, I appreciate you guys a lot. Like I said before the podcast, you guys are just you're so focused on service and bringing good things to the masses in the best way you can, and I think service is essential to making waves, so to speak, making good things happen. So,
well, thank you.
I appreciate
Amen.
you.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, my friends, we'll see you next time on the Boss Hole Chronicles.
Thanks very much for checking out this episode of the Boss Hole Chronicles. It was so good to have you here. And if you have your own Boss Hole story that you want to share with the Boss Hole Transformation Nation, just reach out. You can email us at mystory@thebossholechronicles.com. Again, mystory@thebossholechronicles.com. We'll see you next time.